I was hanging out with other moms at the PTA, and I mentioned casually that my husband washes my hair, and everyone was like, I am the most jealous of you I've ever been of anyone. And everyone in the comments, like every woman was like, that's the hottest thing I've ever heard.
I'm jealous of it.
Exactly. It sounds really nice, but like that is sexual. It is, and we don't talk about that stuff. Like that stuff, I think, gets ignored. And like the idea that sex is only about an orgasm or only about penetration is like so limiting when there's so much hot stuff you could be doing with another adult.
But first, a word from our sponsors.
When your mission is beyond missionary, step up your game with Liberator. Their collection of transformable sex furniture and sex toy mounts will put you in sexual positions you never thought were possible. Use promo code MANWHORE and save 40% off the best-selling Wedge Ramp combo at Liberator.com.
Welcome to the MacLeod podcast.
Shout out to the Mammary Maestros, to the Hypno Barbies. What's up, all you bent over holdovers, and everyone in the Society of Snow Sluts? This is Billy Presida, and you're listening to the Podcast. Welcome to my weekly series of sex-positive conversations coming to you every Wednesday for it's almost 10 years now. If you're new to the show, I started this podcast interviewing my exes about sex, dating, and why we didn't work out. And I am about to record with a few more of those this month. Get ready. Miss Giggles, is she going to do it? TBD. But for now, this week, I have got on sex and dating advice columnist Sophia Benoit. Not Sophia Benoit, as I've been saying for years. She's on talking about sex, talking about falling in love with a boyfriend, about having a little bit of a monogamous FOMO, and more. And we're going to get to her in just a little bit. Naked Comedy Show, it's coming up March 22nd. Tickets are now on sale. Link at the top of the you-know-where, the schnotes. And if you're listening closely enough, if you didn't skip the intro, use promo code WETWIPES. You get $5 off. I don't really need to give you a promo code. I just want to reward you for good behavior. If you're here to listen to Sophia, you may want to fast forward about 10 minutes because you're probably not very interested in what I'm about to say. It's all about me, and Sophia isn't even present for it, but soon she will be. And for those of y'all who are interested in my life, hey, here you go. This podcast is turning 10 years old next month, April 16th. 10-year podiversary. Got me thinking. I've had two legit day jobs my entire life. I've only, and I don't want to insult wage workers and call their jobs not legit. I'm just talking about, I've had two jobs where my dad would say, oh, he has a real job. I don't know what to call that, but that's what I've had. I was a fact checker at Celebrity Gossip magazines for 3 years. Which I only got a couple years after college because a guy I know was the head of the research department, and he texted me one day saying, can you show up to an office and not embarrass me? That was my interview. That's all I had to do. Then I quit that job at 27. The podcast has been going a few years. Patreon was just starting up. Ads were starting to sell. I was like, let's swing the bat. Let's go for it. And then 2018 and 2019, I did like 10 months as editor-in-chief of a now defunct comedy news website called Laughspin, which I also got from this first guy who owned the website, sold it to someone else, and then recommended me to be the editor-in-chief. So I did that, but that's all I've done. I've never had to like do an interview or write cover letters, right? Like, I mean, the only time I've done rounds of interviews when I've interviewed for reality television, like I've nenever had to do the job hunt process. And if anyone's wondering, no, like I've not like relied on some sort of trust fund or, I don't know if anyone's ever Googled me and found the old guy in a suit. That's my dad. He's got money. I don't. We have different bank accounts. And as the podcast approaches 10 years next year, it's got me thinking. It's got me thinking about my financial future. Because when you're 28 and like a hustling creative and you're following a dream, you're aspiring. I think women found that attractive in me. They're like, oh my God, he's pursuing his dreams. It's, oh God, and he must be kind of good at it because he's making some money, but he's not at this level up here. It was like kind of easy to, I think it was cute when I was 28. I don't think being a professional poor person is going to be cute at 38. I'm 34 right now. I think I still got time to be cute and hustling, but like I think that clock's going to run out soon. And it's got me thinking like, well, what do I want to do in this next phase of life? You know, is this the quality of life I want to be doing? I think about the options. Like, well, what are my options? Law school? I haven't wanted to go to law school since I saw Legally Blonde 2 in high school. Law school would have to be I'm quitting everything and I don't want to be a star. I just want to make a living. I'd be doing that schooling to get this specific job that makes at least this much money so I can have some sort of quality of life. That's an option out there. Not my favorite. What about another? Okay, coaching. That keeps getting floated and dangled at me at this point in my career. Someone who talks about sex kind of gets away from the funny. Some of you might be saying, Billy, you abandoned the funny years ago. Point. I've talked to some people about what it would look like if I got into like sex or dating coaching or men's coaching or already my balls are shrinking. But I guess that's a pivot that would like make sense with what I do. I could just continue doing what I'm doing and just hoping. But if you haven't given me $2 after 10 years of this show and over 500 episodes, I mean, I don't know if there's something new that's going to get you on board. But I guess I could still have hope for the next month and a half. I've broken it down many times before. If a quarter of you were giving $2 a month, I'd be in a comfortable situation. So another option is getting a job. Hey. And I'm poking around LinkedIn. For starters, there are some jobs where I go like, there's no way you're actually hiring anyone from LinkedIn for this. This has to be some kind of weird legal requirement. I saw an ad for on-air talent for Z100, which if you're not from around here is like the big pop music radio station in the tri-state area. I was like, I don't think you're getting a fucking DJ from LinkedIn. This is nonsense. And if that's how they hire the ZJs, then I am concerned. That says to me that 20 years ago when I was listening to Z100, that I was listening to a guy who maybe got the job off of Craigslist. That just feels icky. But then another thing is I'm looking around at these jobs and I'm in New York. In New York, we have a requirement that you have to list salaries or like a salary range. And I'm seeing salaries for some very full-time jobs where I go, I make more as a podcaster. How? So we're back here. Something about post-Wallet Note Lady breakup, as well as my age and, you know, my stage in the career, definitely like has me thinking about what I want. And I want to make a living talking, particularly making people laugh, but I'll settle for just talking. Attention. Is attention a career? Seems so in this day and age. But the other thing I want, and I don't know which I want more, but I want that long-term girlfriend, lover, wife, person. I want someone who I can hold hands with for the next 30 to 50 years, depending who eats their vegetables. I want someone who makes my life both safe and exciting. I want someone who values sex and who enjoys pleasure. And in theory, I could even enjoy some ones, but even that seems to be up in the air in as much as like, well, non-monogamy was one of the factors of the breakups with Wallet No Lady. And so I was thinking, well, if you give me the choice today, her or non-monogamous lifestyle, like I choose her. So I think, okay, that puts some clarity of what I want. In theory, if that person wants kids and is someone I could see having kids with, I would want kids too. That tends to require the money. And I don't know how many of you are planners or how many of you are like me and are figuring out life month to month, week to week. But there's definitely a lot of value in in planning that future or putting, I think George Carlin said success is when preparation meets opportunity, right? And am I prepared? Am I in a position for the opportunity of that lifelong person, of someone who could maybe even be the mother to my children? Am I in that spot? Was I with Wallet No Lady? No. That made me realize I need to catch the fuck up, because if I want what I want, there are going to be some prerequisites I got to bring to the table already. And, maybe I could have focused on more of this stuff in my late 20s pre-COVID as, we were gearing up. And, well, no time like the present to get shit started. I'm going to have to do the work now to get the body that attracts that attention later. Do I want to have the financial stability to even consider parenthood? I'm going to have to figure that part out now for when it shows up later. Do I want to be in like an emotionally more regulated place where my temper and neurodivergence don't blow the fuck up as easily? I have to do that work now in therapy to be ready for that relationship later. A lot of this might sound like, yeah, duh, Billy, welcome to the game of life. Fair. I think this is where maybe I can try to connect it with my POV in that I do think capital M men can get frustrated because they were told that they need to do these life planning things as part of having a family, getting a wife or a long-term significant other to be considered successful. We were sold achieve, succeed, obtain. And then I think there are a lot of guys who do that planning stuff. They spend all their 20s busting their ass maybe. And I think they can get upset when they got the Amex Black card and women still don't want to fuck them. But I did the thing and I went to the thing and I got and why can't I get sex and or love now? And I think that's when we see a lot of the nice guys turn not nice. Anytime dudes feel like they followed some set of rules that was going to get them love at the end. I know I keep saying woman, but sorry. I don't know if this crosses over into queer male culture, particularly like gay guy culture. I don't know if there's the same myth of that, but I think there's a lot of dudes who date women who get frustrated there. But I did all the steps. Why don't I have pussy? Why don't I have love? Why don't I have a family? Because baby cakes, life is not a video game. Just because you followed all the correct steps in the instruction manual does not mean you get the princess at the end. What I'm trying to say is, give me $2 on Patreon. Give me $5 if you're fancy. And or Billy's like looking for, maybe a job thing. I'd really rather fucking talk to you people week in and week out. But that's a little life update and some words, some thoughts on preparation in our dating lives. Before I bring on Sophia Benoit, I can't believe it's not Benoit. I'm truly shooken. Before we get to Ms. Benoit, Fan Whore Appreciation Moment is when I like to thank some members of the Fan Whore community on Patreon, the people who are trying to keep me away from a office. Yes. These are the official Fan Whores. So I want to give a big thank you right now to Teresa Wedekind. We now have another hot peep show couple. Ooh. I love it when we have couples in the peep show. It allows us to get both perspectives of a really hot sex tape. Teresa, glad you two are in there. Thanks for being members. Thanks for supporting the pod. And a big shout out to Megan Landry, who came on over from the free trial. Yeah, she got the free trial and she realized, you know what? These bony eps, they're worth sticking around for. Thanks for staying a member. Thanks for supporting the show. And you too can become a member, support Billy's hopes and dreams and financial future, as well as receive a slew of great rewards, such as joining us in the Peep Show. And if you don't know what the Peep Show is, where have you been? It's a dirty group chat that we've been in for I think 6 or 7 years. And we just share nudes, gifts, and compliments all day, every day. It's a beautiful place. And you can be in it when you join at patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. There's also a bonus episode coming out tomorrow exclusively on Patreon with Sophia. Sophia Benoit. I have been following Sophia on Twitter for years. She's super funny, and she's also a well-respected sex and dating columnist. She writes for places like GQ and Bustle and other spots. Recorded with her when I was out in Los Angeles, and this is me with Sophia Benoit. As we age, our bodies are changing. Certain parts need more support than they used to. Other areas are getting a little sorer faster. And that's why it's important to make sex more comfortable. And that's where Liberator comes in. Liberator has been making fuck furniture to make sex more comfortable, more pleasurable, and last longer for decades. Their best-selling wedge ramp combo gets you in the right positions just a little easier, just a little bit more comfortable, which means you're ready to be in that position longer and harder. And you can get 40% off Liberator's wedge ramp combo when you use promo code manwhore at Liberator.com. Or you can click the link at the top of the show notes to go right to the product. Again, 40% off their best-selling wedge ramp combo with promo code manwhore. Or you can just browse around Liberator.com and upgrade your sex life today. Two people talking, and I'm glad to be here, with Sophia Benoit, which I learned I was saying it wrong for a few years.
Most people are. And if they do say it right, they know it because of Chris Benoit, a murder, or I don't know if I should add a ledge to that, but I feel like we all know. It's either that or the sex toy Benoit balls. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot about the Benoit balls. But those are spelled differently, right?
They are often, although occasionally you can find Benoit balls that are spelled like my name, but like mostly they're Benwah, I think.
I recorded with someone yesterday who she found out she's Italian, like me, but she's dating a real Italian, not like my dad from like North Jersey Italian, but like a guy from Italy knows Italian. Yeah. And from dating him, found out that for the first like 50-ish years of her life, she'd been saying her last name wrong. Oh, well, my last name Benoit is from my Italian side of the family. Like my grandpa was from there, but it's from the part that's like really close to the French border. So a lot of the names are like French-ish, But everyone's always like, "Oh, are you French?" And I'm like, "Actually, yes, but it's my mom's side's French." But like that name, I don't know. It's like a mess. But yeah, no, Italians are they're really on you about pronunciation. The ones that there's ones that drive me insane though. Like I will say, like I'm kind of that asshole too. Like people in America always say bocce for bocce ball. It's bocce.
It's bocce. It's not bocce. I know everyone says. It drives me nuts.
This weekend, I'm learning so much.
I know. It's like an educational from the Italians. They're always correcting people.
As I was saying, off mic before we were getting started, how I feel like I couldn't find you as someone who talks about sex and dating, talking about your sex and dating, through say podcasts or even trying to search up articles. I feel like would they all just end up in the book?
A lot of it ended up in the book, and a lot of it, I'm actually writing a fictional book right now that. I swear this all connects and is not a plug for something. It's not sellable yet, so I'm not plugging anything. But I'm writing a fiction book right now, and it has a lot of,
that you cared enough though to say I'm not trying to just plug.
I'm not. I swear there's a point to this. This is not. That sounded like such a actually no.
Well, it's just very self-aware, which makes sense for how self-aware of a website you have. I appreciate your site so much.
Oh, thank you.
It's I could imagine you just hating making it the whole time, but be I'm going to throw in humor.
It used to be even more fun. I had a really good time making my first website, which was shoddyfireburningonthedancefloor.com. And I ended up being told by multiple people when I wrote my book that were professionals, they're like, we would like you to be easier to find on the internet. And I was like, all right, you guys got it. But on that one, I had a whole page that was devoted to how Matthew Broderick killed someone with his car and then ended up moving to a town, or ended up buying property in Ireland, which is the country where he killed someone with his car. And he bought it in Kilcar, Ireland. And I was like, why there? that's so weird. But I had a whole page on my website devoted to this, and my publishers were like, please, no. Anyway, so the fiction book, that I've been writing it, and it has a lot of like sex scenes in it. Okay. And I feel like for me, that's been so much harder to write because I feel like there's like this assumed personal element within writing a fictional sex scene that like people have the assumption that either like you want this, you like this as the author, or that like at least like this is what you think is normal of sex. And I've gotten so much more in my head about it and about writing this stuff because there's again this like presumption of like personalness versus when I write like an article for GQ or Bustle that's like, help, I don't have orgasms, what do I do? How do I tell my partners? Like, to me, that's like no problem. And I tell people all the time, like, I've had so many work calls where I'm like talking to whoever is my editor / boss about like prostates and stuff. Like, I'm not afraid to talk about anything. And I had a friend of a friend met me for like the third time and was like, can I talk about something in front of you? Is this going to be weird? And she didn't know I was a sex writer. And she was like, I'm really getting into like, I'm like really into guys like pumping their penises. Like that is like really turned me on recently. And she's like, I'm so sorry if that's weird. I was like, you cannot even fathom the things I'm talking about for my day job. Like this is not weird to me. I mean, it shouldn't be weird to anybody, but you know what I mean? Like, but then I think you're right. Like there is a distance that comes with that. Like there's a distance to being able to be like prescriptive and give advice and, you know, interview sex therapists and sex workers and interview people about their sex lives. Like a lot of times I'm not in it. So I am a little bit removed. Like I do have that like space to not like disclose everything, you know?
What you were putting out before, you know, you started writing for like GQ and stuff. I mean, was that like more kind of sexually personal?
Yeah, I think before I started writing more publicly and I was just like on Twitter saying every thought that came into my head, I was always very like, not always. I started my Twitter and I was incredibly clean because everybody at the time was like, you're never going to go to college if you say a bad word on the internet. And so I had like all clean jokes, which was like genuinely a challenge for me. Like I saw it that way. I was like, if I want to do stand up, which at the time I did, I was like, then I need to be able to write jokes and I can't rely on them just being like crass or inappropriate or anything like that. And after about like
looking at your poster of Seinfeld as you thought about.
I did not know. Okay, first of all, I like did not know anything about stand up when I wanted to be a stand up. Like I wasn't really allowed to watch TV. Definitely wasn't allowed to watch stand up. I think I'd seen stand up like 2 times before I went to college. And then I like found out about it. Like it was like you would think that I was raised like in like a Mennonite, you know, family. But I wasn't. I just was raised by a dad who is really Italian and loves The Sopranos and thinks it's like Tony Soprano 1954 in this house. So he just...
We don't eat pussy in this house.
Yeah, exactly.
Or we don't admit to it.
Exactly.
If we learn from the episode. We're all doing it, but we're not going to admit to it.
He just like hated TV and movies. Or not TV, like TV and the internet. Yeah, so he hated social media. So I just like didn't know about stand-up that much. And so I was like, okay, I need to like learn how to write jokes. So I had a clean Twitter.
How do you even know what stand-up was then, really?
I literally remember being about 17 years old and I went and stayed in Dallas at my aunt's house with my mom and like it was on TV and I was like, that's so random. And if you don't really like, I knew of stand up. It's not like I like was that sheltered, but I'd never watched it in my entire life. Honestly, if you've never seen stand up before, stand up is incredibly random. Like you took one element of your personality that either you've decided on or other people have decided on, which is being funny. And then you're like, I'm going to do a project performance on it. Like that's weird. You know what I mean? Like that's a bizarre thing to do. The first person to do stand up was a fucking weirdo. They were like, let me do a speech. It's not persuasive at all, by the way.
Kevin Pollak called it, it's hey, look at me as a career.
Yeah. It's weird and very egotistical and very like, it's very artificial. Like you're in a scenario that you've created and then been like, wouldn't it be funny if? And it's like, well, yeah, but why don't you just have that scenario happen? You know what I mean? Like, so, and I love stand up. It's not like that sounds so negative against stand up, but like, so I wrote clean jokes at first, but then I know what happened. I don't know why I said I guess. I went to college. I made friends with guys for the first time in my life because I'd been a very overweight kid who never spoke to a man in my entire life. Like no male influences at all. And then went to college, tried to become like a chill girl who was friends with all guys. Disgusting. Hate that for myself, but also a journey. And what can you do? And at that point, I was like, the world's my oyster, and I'm gonna like crack open and become like a sexist asshole piece of shit who loves sex and is trying to prove to everybody how much I love sex and blowjobs, and like it was so cringy. It's so awful to think about who we were at 19. But
is this like because of what you're posting online, or like just the way you talk like in chill girl conversation?
Both. Like I just became that online and in person. And then like, so I was just like willing to say anything. Like that was like, I needed attention, not needed, was going for attention. And so I would say like anything, and I'd be like, oh my God, I love blowjobs, they're so great, or whatever, which like, again, you're hearing this now and you're being like, that woman sounds awful. She was awful. Like God love her, but that was awful. So annoying.
Is it awful to love blowjobs?
No, it's wonderful to love blowjobs, but like not in this like performative, bizarre
pick me way.
Yeah. And like, I get why, like when we make fun of pick me people, it's like, okay, but male attention is really socially valuable. So like, I get it. But also like, oh no, you were a 21-year-old who was an idiot, you know? But that made me be like really loud online about sex. And like, again, from an attention perspective, which then transferred into people being like, do you want to write about sex? But at that point, I kind of shifted into like becoming a sex and relationships columnist slowly over time. And I got away from all of this like, I need attention and it needs to be about me, and I need to prove that I like sex. I need to prove that I'm good at sex, and I need to prove that I'm desirable to men via my loudness about sex, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like where that was a very long way of telling you my journey into like.
Yeah, it was fun. It's like, I think it started with the fiction book, but like that went away real quick.
But that my point in that.
No, that's fine. No, that's fascinating what I'm hearing. I'm not sure if I want to like ask about. It's like two different tracks to go on, because like there's the deep thing about like, you know, what needing that attention and being so sexual, and like, were you also sexually acting out, or were you kind of more all talk?
I would say, well, I would say mostly talk. I mean, I loved sex. I like sex. And I also like
was everyone like, Sophia's such a slut, but like if you actually like crunched the numbers?
Oh, the numbers, you don't even need a crunch. You can count that high. Like it wasn't like I wasn't doing that much or with that many different people or anything. I just think I grew up overweight, and which is not to say that, I mean, obviously overweight people are incredibly sexually desirable and have great sex lives. And like, I'm still overweight and have a great sex life, but like the world in which I lived, nobody in my high school was going to date or kiss or fuck a fat person, which is very unfortunate. But like, that's the world.
And even if they wanted to, they're worried about like, well, what will my boys think?
Exactly. Yeah. And I also was like super annoying. So like, let's not just put it all on that. Like, I don't want to put it all on that. But like, because of that, I was like a know-it-all loser nerd. So like, it's not just that, but I think I internalized that like, I wasn't gonna get to have sex because I was overweight. And then I lost a lot of weight. And then I got attention from guys for the first time in my life. And it wasn't everything I wanted, but it was like I wanted attention from every single man that had ever existed. I wanted them all to be in love with me. That was like my ideal. And I think it's everyone's ideal that everyone's in love with them secretly. Like, you know, like no one's like, oh, I hope no one likes me, you know? But I think I just like internalized that I wasn't going to like have a sexual life. So once I did get like an ounce of it, I was like, it was kerosene on like I was just like, oh my God, I could have a sex life. I could have sex with somebody. I could do this. So I was
especially
like,
when everyone tells you you're not gonna.
Yeah. So
long, because I that was me high school as well. And grades, I mean, I was convinced I'd be sexually undesirable. I go to NYU, I get away from all the bullshit, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, I'm cute. Oh. And like people enjoy my company and want to have sex with me. Like, it's amazing. And then you go like, I just want to go have all of it.
Right. And I would like wanted to have sex all the time. And I also felt like, to me, sex wasn't a big deal. Like, there are friends of mine that would like wake up from a one night stand and be like, I feel really crappy afterward, which is like totally valid. There's, you know, whatever. But I would wake up and be like, that was great. Like, even if the sex was bad, like that was like the
you didn't have a bunch of shame attached to it.
No, I had no shame. I had no shame about it. Like neither of my parents were ever invested in the idea that sex was shameful. Like neither of my parents, they had like a very European attitude towards sex, which was like, of course people have sex. Like, yeah, duh. Like, of course, you're going to have sex. Like, it just wasn't a big deal. So I wasn't raised religiously. I had no shame about it. And And so I like wanted to be having it constantly because I was like, this is so convenient. I love sex and I'm around a bunch of horny men. But again, I ended up like, I don't know. It's really hard to actually like make sex happen, especially when you're college kids and you don't like, obviously you get drunk and you can like figure that out. But first of all, I didn't drink for a while and I just didn't know how to be
roommates, you don't know. You
don't know what you're doing. You know? Yeah. And you don't know how to like say to somebody, like now if I were in that situation, I'd just be like, I'd go up to somebody and be like, hey, do you want to hook up? Like that could be fun. At the time, that was like a mortifying thing to do, you know? But yeah, so that was kind of like my, like at that point again, like I just, it wasn't all talk, but it was a lot of talk, you know?
When do you think sex became less validating for you? Or is it still?
That's a good question. I still think I have hangups about it, and I work on that with myself, not like with a professional, which I probably should. But I
have 120,000 people that I can go work this out with. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still think, and I've talked to other people about this because one of my columns is for GQ is called Sex Lives, and it's all interviewing men about their whole sex histories. And one of the things that I've found, and I found in my life outside of this as well, is that people who consider themselves late bloomers, whatever that is for them, they feel like they've missed out on something, especially romantic or sexual, in their youth and adolescence. That sticks with them forever. Mm-hmm. It's always like there's a tiny flicker of that for the rest of their life, which is I missed out on, you know, having sex in high school, or I missed out on whatever like experience it is.
Yeah. I missed out on threesomes. I missed out. Yeah.
Yes. And it like sticks with you that you're a late bloomer. Again, those are like, that's in quotations, but you know, that it sticks with you that you like missed out. And so I've really tried hard to be like, you need to get over that feeling that you've missed out and that you're so convinced that you like lost opportunity or lost your youth or whatever so that you can actually enjoy yourself now. So I think like with my current relationship, which is, oh my God, it's been 8 years now, which is crazy. 8? Isn't that nuts?
How old are you?
I'm 31. So we started dating when I was 23.
Oh, so you didn't really, I mean, I don't know y'all like, I assume monogamous or?
Yeah. And
so you did like, you didn't really do like any sort of 20s, like any,
oh, I know.
Wild sex, whatever.
Which is what I wanted.
With others, that would have happened, like, that's like college and then boom.
Yes. And that's what I wanted. Like I wanted, when I met my boyfriend, I told him straight to his face, like he likes monogamy and loves like that, and that's not really my jam, but like for him, sure, love you, whatever. I mean, it's not like it's like a chore to not, you know, to be monogamous to him or anything like that.
Like, look, when you want to let me, like, cool, yeah.
Like I'm much more the kind of person that's like, I think at least, you know, it's easy to say, but I feel like I'd be like, oh yeah, if you like haul past, wouldn't be a huge deal to me, but like when I met him, I told him straight up, and probably shouldn't have looking back, but I was like, I love being single and like, I don't really want to be in a relationship. And I told him that for a while, but like, it was very clear that we were in a relationship. So finally I was like, we should probably just be in a relationship. He's like, yeah, I've kind of been waiting for you to like figure that out because we're like only dating each other, you know? So, but like I wanted wild 20s. Like I wanted like one night stands and bar bathrooms and like it still bothers me that I've never had sex in a car, which is like not a satisfying experience for anyone. No one's like, oh my God, I had the best sex of my life in a car.
But you can still do that.
I can, but
and you
also
can do it easier because like ostensibly like it's easier when you don't have to also like fumble with the condom. Like if that's already out the picture, great. It's now an even easier task.
Except for that
you're also of an age where like y'all can rent cars.
I was going to say, if you saw the car that I just drove up in, the Chevy Spark that I have, the tiny electric car that's the size of like a tennis shoe, you might be like, it's not easier. But yes, I could have sex in a car now. But now you're an adult, and there's the difference is you're an adult and you're like, oh, the like urgency and the need for secrecy isn't there. So like we could have sex in a car, and my boyfriend's been like, if you want to fuck in a car, we can fuck in a car.
We'll go rent a SUV. It's fine.
I guess, but then you're just doing it for the sake of being like, I fucked in a car, which like we all have beds. You know what I mean? Like,
but it sounds like you were like, you know, it's like if there's FOMO, sometimes you gotta go do the thing and be like, oh, I guess that was fine, but now it's done. It's in the past. It's like someone who like who's idolized a threesome for so long. They have a threesome. They're like, that was fun, but like it may not have like changed their world, and then they're kind of like, oh, you know, it's just a threesome, whatever.
Yeah, I totally, like, again, I think I could do it. I think, honestly, the growth is more me understanding that, like, I don't need to have had sex in a car for me to have had, like, a complete and good sex life. Like, it's fine if you don't hook up in a Honda Civic, you know, like you can miss that. It's okay. Like, that's fine. And I don't, like, I'd rather the thing I want is for it to happen organically. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the more the fantasy is you're like, oh my God, I had to fuck in a car. You
Right.
know?
When you're on a ski trip and you just happen to have rented an SUV of some sort, something with a flatbed maybe in the back, and
Sure.
then it can. Or,
Exactly.
You have to artificially do a little bit to then let it. Or you got to set up some of the dominoes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, not the whole thing though. You know.
So you still feel like you got like some FOMO on things.
I do, but I also think because I write about sex so much, and I read a lot of romance novels, I read a lot of books with sex in them, and I think about sex a ton.
Yeah.
And I talk about sex a ton, and I always have, like, since I was a kid that was like got in trouble for masturbating too much at preschool, you know, not that I knew what sex was then, but you know, still, I feel like I've always just been a really like sexual person. And so I think there's an extent to which I'm always going to feel like I've missed out on something, you know, like you don't get to experience sex with every person. Like, I don't get to fuck Jacob Elordi, and that sucks. But like,
Who?
He's the guy that was Elvis and Priscilla, and he was in Saltburn, and he's like super hot. It's just
The Saltburn, the guy whose like estate it was. He's come up like 3 times this weekend on this show. That keeps coming up. I don't get. Okay.
He's the worst part is that like a lot of people are like, oh, he's so tall, and that's why, and like he's like 6'5" or something. And I, Italian to my core, do not care about height at all. And I'm just like,
Bless
I
you.
don't even care. I don't give a shit. I just think he's gorgeous. But like everybody has FOMO about something. Like, there's always someone you didn't get a fuck or kiss or like bang in a bar bathroom. Like, you know, there's always somebody or something, or, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. When you were oversharing sexually online though, like you didn't think twice about that. You're just like, yeah, whatever. It's just sex.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
No, I didn't care at all. Like, I mean,
Would you get frustrated then writing the stuff for like GQ and stuff where like you're not talking about your sex life? Would it be like, why can't I write a fucking thing about?
No, honestly, I just liked talking about sex. And I don't even know why I put it in the past tense. I love talking about sex.
It's a fun thing to nerd out on.
Yeah. And I also think we have a limited amount of good conversations about it. Like, when I call people for the Sex Lives article and I ask men about their entire sex history, I would say at least 50% of the time, the person at the end of the call is like, this was so nice to talk to somebody about. And I'm sure that phenomenon is exaggerated if you were socialized male and raised male. And like, I'm sure that is true too. But I do think, like, how often do you go to your friends and say like, hey, this was like the hottest sex of my life 7 years ago. I really want to tell you this story. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't have.
You gotta get better friends. Like, like my orgy friends, that's like a standard conversation. And then comics, well, like if they're a comic who has sex, then like maybe there. But like the rest, like I have a Discord server full of fucking people who are just like, they're just happy they have a place to talk about sex because they're like, I can't tell this story to my friends.
Yeah, and that is good, and that's really valuable. Like, I'm not the thing I say.
No, I think it's good to have it. I think I'm here. You're like, it's sad that people don't have that. A lot of people.
Yeah, or that it's required to be not required, but it feels like it's required to be like anonymous or like on Discord or Reddit or something where you have like a distance between the other person and you. Like it isn't like for how big of a thing it is in all of our lives, whether it's wanting it, not wanting it, having it, not being able to have it, all of those, like the pain and pleasure that comes, and I don't even mean that as much of a like pun as it is, but the pain and pleasure that comes with like having a sexual life or a non-sexual life is like incredibly present for all of us all the time. And yet it's like we're so puritanical. We don't talk about it.
Yeah. And I think that's part of my fascination with talking about. I like talking about the things that like we're not supposed to talk about or question. So whether it's like a societal norm that seems a little arbitrary and silly, or something kind of religious, or sex, like I feel like I was a George Carlin kid, and so I think I just like was fascinated with all these things that like we're not supposed to talk about this, or that guy's questioning something that's supposed to be assumed. So I think that's like maybe part of my fascination with sex is that like it's because so many people won't talk about it. Well, now I want to talk about it. If I grew up and everyone was talking about sex all the time, maybe I'd be bored by it.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think there is also like, again, I think there are ways in which like in my own past, I've talked about sex that I wouldn't do now. Like, again, for attention and for like the like I love blowjobs girl. Like that's not who I am now, and that really doesn't hold much interest for me.
Pouring one out for your boyfriend.
Yeah, no, I mean I still love blowjobs, but I don't need to tell
But like
people.
the reason I love blowjobs is different now. That's
But I
what's
mean,
important.
kind of, yes.
It's the work, Billy.
I mean, kind of, yes. But like, also, I still have fascination to talk about how I talked about it then, but I don't really want to be that person anymore. You know, like I don't want to be the person that's talking about sex to like get attention, you know, like that's not really valuable to me in the same way. I mean, it's fun to get attention. Don't get me wrong. Attention's great, but
We are both holding microphones.
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I
it's
feel like that. I mean, that is the thing that like I think people very much like sex. People like to pretend that they don't want. Like they like to pretend that they don't desire, attention the same way they like to pretend they don't desire sex all the time. Like we're all thinking about it frequently, or not all, but many of us are thinking about it frequently. But there's like this suppression of like that's not polite, you know?
Yeah. When you start, like in the time, so you've been writing about sex and dating, what, like 8 years? You said
About
around
like
when-
8.
oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
about
that's 8
about 8 years. Yeah.
Now, when I ask this, I don't mean like a certain technique thing or, you know, a type of a toy or whatever. Or I mean, it's a little bit more big picture, but like, what do you feel like you've learned about sex and dating and relationships from writing about it?
One of the bigger things that I've learned is that I think there's so much good sex that doesn't seem like sex. How do I word this? There's so much in the spaces in between sex and not sex that like I didn't used to think of as sexual. But like the way that I've described it to other people is like anytime that you and another person are doing something together that feels good, that's sex. Like that's sex, whatever. So people often, like the example that I've used frequently is like the good part about shower sex, like isn't necessarily or almost never is putting a dick in a vagina, which obviously is heteronormative and limited anyway. But like that's not necessarily the good part of shower sex. Like the good part of shower sex could be for your partner washing their hair. Like that could be the hottest, most erotic thing. Like there was a woman on Reddit probably 10 years ago. Lord knows why this is stuck in my brain, but it was like, what do you and your partner do that like you think is great? And this woman wrote in and was like, I'm paraphrasing from a memory, but it was basically like, I was hanging out with other moms at the PTA and I mentioned casually that my husband washes my hair and everyone was like, I am the most jealous of you I've ever been of anyone. And everyone in the comments, like every woman was like, that's the hottest thing I've ever heard.
I'm jealous of it.
Exactly. It sounds really nice, but like that is sexual. I mean, it can be. It can also be romantic and intimate and all these other
It makes
things.
my haircuts very uncomfortable.
But like it is, and we don't talk about that stuff. Like that stuff I think gets ignored. And like the idea that sex is only about an orgasm or only about penetration is like so limiting when there's so much hot stuff you could be doing with another adult. And I think people that open their life up to that, which often are people in the kink community, often people in the queer community, often people in any BDSM community, often people like a lot of people in the polyamorous community or ethical non-monogamous community, like a lot of people are intentionally opening up the discussions to be like, hey, let's like make it intentional that we like open up our lives to talk about what is hot and sexual and a turn on and all these other things. But a lot of people numerically are just going about their day being like, sex is a thing where when I XYZ with this body part until I come, that's sex.
And all the stuff we did before that wasn't the sex. That was the stuff we were doing to prepare for the sex when actually all those activities were also sex.
Yeah.
And like having this hierarchy of, you know, of sex acts and everything like that.
Totally. Like foreplay sex too. Like, I don't know why you're like, that's like being like, if you only talked about like a movie as the second act and then you were like, the climax is the end of the movie, that would be fucking bizarre. Yeah. Like, that's a weird movie you just made. Like, that's not how movies work, you know?
I feel bad for people when I feel like I once, like, when I first learned that type of a thing, I would almost be like saying it to correct someone. But now I say it in almost a pitiful way. It's like, oh, you think that when you talk about it being so limited, it's like, oh, that's all you think sex can be? That sucks. Because if you don't get to that exact act, then you had a bad night, as opposed to like going upstairs and fooling around, whatever that looks like. It's like there's endless possibility. I haven't had to like do this conversation with a woman in like a lot of years. But like sometimes I would say hey, the first time we go up, it's like, hey, they'll invite me up and I'll say, I don't want to fuck this first time. Mm-hmm. And they'll almost be like confused. Sometimes it's a whole like, oh, is it me? Whatever. But a lot of them will sometimes go like, well, then what do you want to do? And then I'll be like, well, gosh, there's like so many different options. Like, yeah, we could do this, we could do this, we could do that. And we, and they'll almost be like, some of them would not think it was like worth the time. And some of them were just like, it's almost as if they didn't consider that was enough. They'd be like, a hand job could be like enough. I'd be like, yeah, if it's a great hand job, it's going to be great.
Right. And like all of us have had like incredibly erotic moments that have not led to an orgasm that is still like hot and fun. Like almost everyone, I think, has had those kind of moments. So it's like, it's just, you're limiting yourself, like you said, like I don't mean it condescendingly or anything, but like I almost feel sorry for you. Yeah. Like I feel sorry for you that this isn't like part of your sex life, Did your boyfriend come kind of prepackaged with a lot of this mentality? Did you have to teach him stuff? I will say, I mean, he is an incredibly like literal person and like very not like he is who he is all the time, says what he thinks, like is not shy about giving his opinion on anything, will say anything.
Well, and we are but men.
Yeah, like very like frank and like open and very like he is fine communicating himself, like he gets it. So I wouldn't say he came very, very mature, and he has taught me a ton about sex and a ton about relationships that I like. He's also older than I am and had been in way more relationships, like had been in tons of relationships and had a lot of sex before I had. So I was just like I was much more new to the actual acts of sex and relationships, but I am much more theoretical about all of this, and I read about it all the time. Again, I'm like, that's part of my job, and I write about it a lot. So there are times when I feel like I have an expectation for him based on being like, of course we all know that this is like the best. It's like if my sister was a teacher and then had a kid and did so much research on having a kid and like knows everything about it. And so people will like try to give her kid something and she'll be like, oh, we do this now. And I'm like, no one fucking knows that. Like, you're the only one who knows that. So it's hard to match up with somebody who's like an expert at something. So I think there's times when I expect him to be like able to talk about and know about sex and relationships on an expert level like I do. And he's an expert in his own self. Mm-hmm. And I'm more like, what about the big picture? And he's like, but it only matters what we want to do. Right. You know that, right?
So you want to talk about it as a concept and he wants to talk about it in practice between you two.
More so, yeah. Like also, I don't think, like I think he's happy to like just have sex and not talk about it, which is very foreign to me. Like I want to talk about, like that's the only thing I ever want to talk to anybody about.
Like, wait, like before you fuck around, you want to like have a gab?
Not even before. I just like, I love talking about sex. So I'm like
in the middle of sex, you're like, I want to talk about the sex right now.
not in the middle of sex, but like other time, like as an example, like I mean, I'm bi, which we talked about a second before we started recording, but like, so I also find women hot, but like we'll watch a show and I'll be like, she's the hottest by far, like love her, or like she has great boobs or something like that. He doesn't really do that. Like that's just not his go-to. Like he just doesn't like, it's internal for him. Okay. So if with encouragement or if he's like had a few drinks, he might like join me on that. But like to me, I'm like, isn't it natural to like have every thought you've ever had come out and you talk about it constantly, you know?
Yeah, like it sometimes leads to a career. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. Don't you want to just like say everything you're thinking?
As a sex and dating advice columnist, what's advice you think you still need? Not that I'm going to come and give it to you. I'm not going to do that unsolicited, but what's something you feel like you still need advice on in your life?
I feel like for being somebody who's so like pro talking about things and like having adjustments and conversations and being like, oh, it's so easy to just have these conversations. I feel like a lot of times with my boyfriend, I let things stay as they are, which is really good. It's like great. Like he and I have great sex. Sorry to call him out in a good way, but whatever. I hope he's fine with that. His friends always like listen to something I do or like read something I write and send it to him. So if any of his friends are listening,
just
we have
text them a fist bump.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like I don't necessarily like push for new things, even if I want them, because I'm kind of like, oh, it's easy enough to do the thing that I already know works. Yeah. So I feel like for myself, if I like were talking to myself, I'd be like, one, try more new things instead of just being like perfunctory about stuff. And again, the perfunctory stuff is great. So it's hard to want to be like, let's explode this. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not that it would explode anything, but it's hard to like.
Are there new things that you want to do that you're just like not going ahead and doing? Or do you feel like you need to do new things for the sake of doing new things?
That's, I think, kind of where I want to figure that out, because I feel like sometimes I want to do new things for the sake of doing new things, which can that has value. I'm not negating that. But I think like his mindset is more like, well, if we know it works, like why? Like I think the thing is I would be the one to take the initiative in that and like trying something new. And so if I'm going to do that, it's going to be on me. And I think sometimes there's times when I like resent that it would be on me. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be the only one bringing new things up.
But it doesn't sound like you have like a new thing you want to do anyway.
I know. So it doesn't even matter.
Problem.
I think actually that's my note for myself then. That's my note. And actually, I wish I could have found a way to get there before I said what I just said. But I think my note for myself is I think there's so much of me that's theoretical because I think about this and talk about this and write about this so much that a lot of times I am matching my own sex life up, even if it's incredibly satisfactory to amazing, and matching that up with this ideal that might not even be good for me.
Yeah.
But it's an ideal I've had. And like one of the best things that my boyfriend has done for me early on, he really like helped me undo this, was he was like, we don't have to have sex a certain number of times. Like you've got it in your head that if we don't have sex this often, that we're having a bad sex life, versus we can just have sex when we want to have sex. And then it will inherently be when we want to have sex, because that's what it is. Like, and I think it took me a long time to get away from the idea of like, oh my God, my friends are having sex more frequently or in a whatever. But like, again, I do think that would probably be my actual answer is how do I get away from the idea that there's like a set of expectations that I'm aligning, like it's almost like I'm cheating off a piece of paper, but like, is that test even got the right answers, or like, what are you like?
Until we're talking about like, months and months and months in between, sexual activity, it's probably not a concern.
Oh no, I know, like we do have sex frequently. I want to be clear, we do.
I picked up on that, but it sounds like it's because like, and I say this because I feel like I can relate to some. It's like when you've read the theory enough and you've read like testimonials and you've heard so many stories, it's like sometimes I'm worried about falling into the trap of one of those stories. Well, I don't want that to happen. So I want to make sure we're having enough sex, even though we're having enough sex.
Yeah. And I think too, like the two things that I think of when I think of this are, one, I had a non-cancerous breast tumor, like 2 or 3 years into our relationship, that required
the minimal amount of words from my erection pill usage to breast cancer, uncomfortably small.
No, but I mean, and it was like, it ended up being fine, but it needed 3 surgeries. And like, we couldn't have sex the same way. And definitely immediately after the surgeries, we couldn't have sex. And like, it changed how we have sex for a bit after each surgery. And like, I was never more grateful that I had already gotten the lesson from him that like, we are solid. And if we don't have sex for a month because you're recovering from surgery, that doesn't change anything. Whether like we're not having sex because it wouldn't be good right now, not because like things are bad between us or because I'm not desirable, you're not desirable. There's no reason other than we do not want to have sex because you had a surgery. Like, or even if we do want to have sex, it's not possible for us, and it's okay. It doesn't change anything. And when we didn't have sex after those surgeries, and I was like, oh my God, I think the Sophia of 2 years ago, before I dated him, if I could somehow, like, if, magic it into the different order, like the Sophia of 2 years ago would be freaking out about not having sex for a month, even if there was a surgery, because it would be like, oh my God, like, that's it. It wasn't like, again, it's this measured up thing in your mind of like, oh my God, we didn't have sex for so long, even though, again, there's an obvious reason.
There's no problem.
There's no problem. But
is there another part? Are there other parts of your life where you overthink like this?
Literally all of them. All of them. I think it's just there's too much going on upstairs, and it's like a frantic rat is like banging a computer up in my brain. There's like so much happening. Oh my God, I had a second thing that it reminded me of, the like not having sex as often, or the compare. Oh, I know what it was. The other thing that it made me think of when you were saying like the boner pill thing, and like the idea of like comparing like yourself to this story you have, is like, in my mind, I always was like, sex all night long is like the marker of like great sex. Like to me, I've always heard people being like, oh my God, we had sex all night, sex for hours. It turns out I don't like that. I don't want to have sex for, I'm done after I've had sex for a while. Like, I'm not saying it's like 4 minutes, but it's not hours. Like my amount, I'm happy to like, we can dip in and out, but I don't want that. And I also like, another thing that I had to like realize was like, I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night. In my mind, that's so hot. But like in the reality of day-to-day life, I feel like if maybe at the very beginning of my relationship, but like right now, I feel like if someone like woke me up in the middle of the night to have sex with me, I'd be like, I am so tired right now. Please, this is not where, I mean, maybe on vacation or something, you know, but like there's these things that to me, I was like, this is the peak of, if you have a good sex life, it will look like this. Mm-hmm. And it just, the reality is so different than that. Like it's so much better and fuller and more intimate and less like, you know, tawdry and common, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of just like, it's not healthy when we know so much and we've read so much and we've heard so many stories and we know a lot of the tropes that are out there. We know a lot of like markers, just we're comparing to stuff that's not real. I think one of my favorite like sex-based studies like that I ever heard about, and it's forever ago, and like most times when I say like I heard about a study, cannot cite it very specifically, but I know it's real. I just can't remember if I heard it on Multi or Dan Savage, and it was a long time ago. But there was a study done where they kind of like, they asked like a bunch of college kids, how much sex do you think everyone's having? And then they said like kind of like this number up here. And then they were like, how much sex are you having? And like everyone was kind of like here. Everyone was having less sex than they thought everyone else was having.
Yeah, there's a thing on Slate. I don't know if it's still up because it, you know, the internet like scrubs itself every 2 years now of everyone's good articles. But there was a thing up where it was like you could put in your number of sexual partners and compare it to everyone else who's responded to this thing, and or at least to their study or whatever. Sure. And everyone who did it, like everybody at the time that it came out, was like, wait, I thought I had so few sexual partners, and it turns out I hadn't. Which, not that there's like, again, I don't want that to sound like there's like good or bad to having a certain number of sexual partners. It's completely neutral. But for myself, who always felt like I had missed out on things, I was like frantically entering my number. And then I got back that I was like above average, and I was like, oh my God, I feel amazing. And I was like, that is what you need to get rid of, is the idea that more sexual partners is better, or that fewer sexual partners is better. Because like, what?
There's a right number for Sophia, and that's the number we're going for.
And like, I would much rather there be 1 or 500 really good sexual partners than like any other number of bad ones, you know? So it's like...
And you also got like apparently a very amazing boyfriend for 8 years great. Out of the deal. Right?
Totally. He's great. And like, that's like, if you want to count number of partners, that's one. But like, you've also in 8 years, you've had a lot of sex that like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I think it's like divorcing yourself from those stories that you tell yourself a good sex life looks like, you know?
I think it's really easy for us to, as you know, former chubby kids to like compare ourselves to everyone else. I think it's very easy because everyone made sure to compare it for us.
That's a good point.
For at least a good chunk of time. That eventually it's like, oh, you don't even need to compare it for me. I'll take care of it. Yes. I know I'm looking at everyone and I'm matching up who's getting dates to prom and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, and then it just like, it fucks our heads up. So then finally, like we maybe start looking differently. I didn't even see it. Like I would murder, not you, but like I'd murder maybe like my Airbnb host to have the body I had like 14 years ago. And 14 years ago, hated that body.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Oh, all the time. I mean, I think that's like another thing I've learned about sex too.
I really hope they don't turn up dead tomorrow. That would be very inconveniently timed. It's going to be so inconvenient,
but such a cool podcast, like the true crime podcast based on the, it's going to be so good.
People are going to be like, look at his face. I knew it.
The Airbnb sex podcast killer podcast.
Oh God.
No, but I think that's the other thing that I like didn't know until I started writing about sex is like how much of our bodies limit us, like for everybody, like whether it's like a surgery or whether it's a medication you're taking, or like I literally can't move my knee in that direction, or like I don't get hard all the time, or I drank too much tonight, or whatever it is, or like that's painful for me, or my body just simply isn't wired that way. Whatever it is, like bodies are also such a limitation that's thrown into sex, and it's so emotional for everybody to have a body. Like everyone's emotional about having a body, and so there's so much baggage there that like one of the most fascinating articles I did, like probably my favorite article to do, even though it didn't necessarily turn out the way I wanted it to, but the interviews I did for an article with quadriplegic and paraplegic people about the sex lives that they had and what their sex lives were like was so fascinating, because you think because of so many people's assumptions about what a body can and can't do, and like if you don't have feeling or you have numbness, what does sex look like for you? And like I feel like there was so much to learn for anyone, myself included, about like, again, it goes back to this idea that like there's so much outside of sex that isn't, or outside of what we like say is like penetration, you know, this is sex in sex ed class or whatever, that's like erotic and sexual and whatever. There's so much mental stuff. There's so much like emotional stuff. There's so much. And then you also have a body that's frequently like not cooperating the way that you want, regardless of who you are, you know?
Yeah. And then in my case now, the heart is not operating, because I'm very inconveniently craving intimacy and connection. And so it's like I'm in positions where I could be having casual sex and like I don't really want to. Damn it. Like,
yeah.
I want to, and I'm not. It's like, yeah, things we can't control getting in the way. It's like all these like limited views, the way people like limit the views on porn, like what's porn. You read like erotic fiction, right? Or how do you phrase what you read?
I mean, I read almost everything. I read porn.
You do read porn. Okay.
Oh, I read a ton of porn. Like I read porn every day.
I did one episode with like that was just like really all get into the weeds on erotica, and I learned that there were like three different. There's erotica, and there's like romantic fiction, and then there's this, and I was like, whoa, okay,
yeah.
A lot of word count, but so there, like people don't think of that as porn. When like frankly, that was like my introduction to porn, because I could sneak it into my boarding school easier because it's just words. Just print out literotica.
Yep.
Or you know, when we talk about like legislation, people talking about or community guidelines on social media, they keep saying porn. I'd be like, foot pics is porn to quite a few people. That seems to be okay. And so I wish we could all just kind of expand our minds on like what these things mean. What a relationship is, right? We're seeing like people learn that like relationship is not by default this one thing. That one thing is one of the many options. You can kind of go any which way with it.
Totally. There's a really good book, and I'm not going to be able to think of the author off the top of my head, but I literally think it's called Porn. And she interviewed so many people in her life. I think it was 18 people, and just printed out the interviews as a book. And it's such a good book. I interviewed her for GQ, and I don't know why her name is escaping me. But one of her biggest realizations as she interviewed people about their porn usage and porn habits and how they felt about porn and everything was like her big thesis by the end. Not that she was like, my big takeaway is we all act like porn is one thing, and it's not at all. Like it's so many things, the same way sex is so many things. So I do think like that's one of the big benefits of like shows like this that talk about sex and talk about relationships and talk about like any intimate but also often private topic is we often have limited views and narrow views and definitions of things until you start talking about them and like kind of cracking them open and being like, oh, that's porn too. That's sex too. That's a relationship too. Like, you know, you got to expand yourself a little bit.
I've not like reviewed your entire like, you know, catalog of writing. There's a lot of it. But do you ever get in the position where you have to do a piece that requires you go do stuff and you have to hit up the boyfriend and be like, hey, we got to do a thing. I got to put a thing in you. Can you wear this?
I don't do anything that he would have to do too much for. It's more like, can you go along with me while I do this? Like if it's like I've never tested any toys out on him. I've done stuff where I've used massage candles that like we would never have used massage candles, which was fine. They were fine, but
why do we need massage candles?
I don't really know. And I'm also like not, I guess you can probably tell by my overthinking and uptightness. I don't love the idea of like I have an open flame that I'm also kind of in the back of my mind is in my room while I'm trying to focus on something else. And I know that the flame isn't going when you pour the wax on someone, I get
But
how
like, there's
massage
still a
candles work.
flame right there. That
Like,
we've all seen quite a few comedy movies where a big scene was there was the hot wax. There's they were doing something sexy and sensual, and there was fire involved. And at some point, the fire went bad, and the dude's back lit on fire, and he jumps out the window into a pool.
Yeah, I quite literally, when I wrote that article, at one point I like pushed a pillow off the bed onto the nightstand on accident, and it was so close to the candle, and I was like, this is inherently not hot, because now I'm worried about fire safety. I don't want to be thinking about this. But I mean, like, I'll do things like that where I'm like, this isn't trying something that is going to drastically change how we have sex. We're just trying something. Probably the weirdest one was when there was a rumor, or maybe a truth going around, that Leonardo DiCaprio vaped and wore headphones while fucking people. And so I wore headphones and vaped while fucking my boyfriend. And I was like, are you cool if we do this? And he was like, sure. So there's things like that. And he's like,
how was that?
It was horrible. It was such an alienating and stupid experience. I was like, this is antithetical to good sex. Like, what could you, and also, what are you listening to? Like, that was one of the hardest choices. I was like, what do I listen to that like only I'm hearing? I think I can't remember if I ended up doing it, but for a while I was like, I'm just going to do the Titanic soundtrack to get in the real Leonardo DiCaprio headspace. But I don't know that I did that. I can't remember what I ended up listening to. But like, he's so on board and open for me talking about everything, and he's just kind of like, yeah, you do what you need to do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, he doesn't care at all.
Not all partners are like that. I just thought someone I spoke to yesterday, she co-hosts a relationship podcast, and like the dude she just broke up with fucking hated when she would like mention anything, and she mentioned like the most tame of a thing on the show. It's not even a sex podcast, and he'd be like, I can't believe you fucking talked about that. And it's just like, it's like she was with that dude for 9 years.
Ooh, I don't think
it's a long time for someone to hate what you do.
It is. I mean, I also started when he and I first started dating, I was doing stand-up more frequently, and he was like,
you got out?
I don't do it. I started working nights, and then it like makes it kind of impossible, and now it's like I stopped doing it for so long. So
I was gonna say, like, congrats on getting out. I don't know how to.
I mean, I feel like I would do stand-up again in a heartbeat. I love doing it, but I also, it's such a horrible thing too.
Well,
it's like,
you're also surrounded by LA comedy, so it's
not great.
Enjoyable.
And yeah, but he was in my sets from the get-go, and he was like, I'm fine with whatever. Like, it's your work, like, you do you. So, and I don't know that I could be with somebody who wasn't pretty open about that, because it's just like, I like talking about shit, So, but yeah, he's open to it all.
Sophia, this has been great. Thanks so much for making time. Before we go, last question is what is your stance on 69?
Yeah, it's and
that seems about right. That seems like about the right opinion.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, look, someone's mouth is on your fucking bits. Like, that's amazing. Like, 10 out of 10 anyway. I'm not going to, I would never say no. If someone's like, let's 69, I wouldn't be like, oh, God, that sounds boring. I'd be like, yeah, sure. But also, it's like, do we need to? Are we in an emergency? Like, is there a rush?
It feels like proposing to watch Goodfellas. I'm never going to say no. But I don't need to watch Goodfellas again. But I mean, we can do it.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Or it's like rearranging furniture. If someone's like, we need to move the bed to this side of the room, you're like, okay, I'll help you do that. But like, I was fine with the bed where it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're like,
it seems really extra complicated, but like if it makes you happy,
absolutely, I'm all in. Like
furniture.
Bobina the Builder over here. Like, let's go. But I don't need to do it.
All right. Well, Sophia, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people go to find you, follow you? You've got a book. I'll have a link in the notes for that.
My book is, well, This Is Exhausting. And you can buy that almost anywhere because the internet exists. And where you'll find me is almost for sure on Twitter at one follower, no dad. And I'm just always there. I write sex lives for GQ, and then I write a column called It's a Pleasure for Bustle. So you can also find me there.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming through. And why don't you go ahead and say goodbye to everybody?
Bye. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. Great. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. There's more. Did you know there's more Sophia Benoit that you can listen to? If you wait like another minute or two, you're going to have more Sophia. Crazy. The best place you can share your thoughts on this week's show is in the episode discussion channel in the Champagne Room. The Champagne Room is our super free, super fun, super sex positive Discord server. And we just added another Patreon-only perk in the server, the Confession Booth channel. We've had like 50 confessions already, anonymous, and some of them pretty spicy. Join the conversations for free at manwhorepod.com/Discord or click the link in the show notes. Everything you need, honestly, at this back end, I don't have to say it all. It's in the show notes. Where's Billy's on TikTok? Show notes. What's my email? manwhorepod@gmail.com or the schnotes, as well as Patreon. The link is in the schnotes. We're trying to hit 500 Patreon members for the 10-year anniversary on April 16th. Even if it's a free membership, you can still count. We're over halfway there. Become a member today at patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. Right now, I'm going to play a teaser, just a tease of my bonus episode with Sophia Benoit that comes out tomorrow for all of my $5 and up fan whores. The prompt was, what are some pitches that you have loved that have not been bought? And she said that she's wanted to write a lot about divorce, which then led to her sharing about her own family's vast relationship with divorce. So that teaser coming up now. Patreon people, you'll hear it tomorrow. The rest of you, next week, we've got comedian Caitlin Palufo. Give me $2. It'll make me happy. Stay slutty.
Both my parents have been married 4 times. Each of them has been married 4 times.
Oh my God.
I know. I know. Yeah, it's why I am.
Did you have to attend all of those?
Luckily, my dad had been married twice before he married my mom, and my mom had been married once, so I missed 3 of them, but I was there for the others. A lot of, well, I guess not my own parents' marriage. I wasn't there for that, but
when they do their 4th, when each of them does the 4th marriage, like when they say like I'm engaged, number 4, what do you say?
Oh boy. So here's the cherry on top of this. My mom is not going to like this, but sorry, Mom, I love you. And she doesn't know how to listen to a podcast, so it's fine. God love her. But one time I asked her, because it's not just that she's been married 4 times. She has had many, many long-term serious boyfriends, and she like told me at least one of them she was engaged to, and then she's casually mentioned another one she was engaged to. And so I asked, how many times have you been engaged? And she goes, oh, Sophia, don't ask me that. And I said, what do you mean? She's like, I don't know. And I was like, how do you not know? How do you not know how many times you have been engaged? That is such a clear number in my mind. Like, I know.
Just count the rings. Like
Literally.
Tom Brady, just be like, there's 1, there's 2.
Oh, my mom, Tom Brady wishes he had as many rings as Peggy. Like, you wish.